really a lot of effort into putting our presentation together. She sent us articles to read, which I sent to everybody. I think she's our first presenter who's given us homework. And we're really looking forward to all of her information. So please help me welcome Dr. Paula.
Thank you, Sherry, and I'm delighted to be here. I hope you can hear me. If any person doesn't hear me, do please raise your hand and I'll be glad to make any adjustments. There are many ways to adjust things. Amplification, is this adequate for those of you in the back of the room? If it's too loud, that's another problem, obviously, that we can adjust for. But are we all squared away fairly well? That's great. Delighted to see you here. I'd love to see our graduates. Raise your hand, an ISU person. There should be a good lot of you here. You spent your years running around the quad when you were preparing yourselves to do that hard work that you're doing today, right? So, well, today there are many more students running around the quad and running around through many classes and doing the exact same thing, and we'll be joining you in a very short time. As we begin today, I will share with you that we have much in common. All of us in here are here because we're doing work that put the lives of children and adolescents at forefront in our professional endeavors. And many of them have very special needs and they require your professional expertise and every imaginable collaboration and every imaginable effort, sometimes stretching us way beyond what we think we can ever deal with. But happily, with a wonderful resource like you have with the ISRC, I've been noting your beautiful website, and Sherry and her amazing availability. I think you're well supported, and if you feel in any way that I can answer your questions today or provide you additional information, I'll be more than happy to do everything I can do myself, all right? And I also have wonderful colleagues at Illinois State University who would indeed go where I cannot go. You know, there's so much knowledge in the field that, you know, we need all of us together working side by side. We can make a difference and we can empower the children that are in our care. So today's schedule is, as Sherry mapped out, clearly the day will go rapidly, and we are going to start out here this morning with underpinnings. We have to walk around with some theoretical underpinning to our work. What does that mean? Obviously we could spend a whole 3 or 4 hours dealing only with theory, couldn't we? But we won't do that because that's not what today is about. But we will remind ourselves, though, that we have to have some sense of professional identity regarding a philosophical, a theoretical, some kind of underpinning that guides our decision making. Because when we face problems, we have to have some kind of guiding principles that guide our thinking. So I offer to you today those that make sense to us at the university and also in my own professional life. I work with children who, way back when I was teaching myself, I worked with children with emotional and behavior disorders. And many of them had complexities that were relative to additional special needs, as in learning disability and into cognitive and intellectual disability, as well as children with communication disorders. So very frequently we have children with communication disorders who also have emotional and behavioral disorders. So whatever guided my thinking when I was working at the San Antonio Children's Center, actually years ago, it was a psychiatric treatment center for children and adolescents with emotional and behavioral, as well as other complicated needs. prior to that, I taught in a public school environment in a BD, self-contained setting, so I can relate to a lot of the teaching needs that many of you have these days. And so as you deal with every new child, taking them one by one, which is another characteristic of our work, we cannot ever expect two children to be the same, never. You know, obviously that's true of all children actually, but perhaps it is even more true of children with special needs. So we'll talk about what is it that guides our problem solving? What is it that guides our thinking? And you will find what we call guided notes, dear people. I have provided to you a set of notes here, and they will not be very useful to you unless you fill in those little blank lines. So if you write in there, and another thing that would be so fun to do would be if you could fill them in without me. That would be so fun. Would you know how to fill in the next two lines on that little slide there for yourselves? And raise your hand if you did. What do you think? Behavior is learned. You got that already. I gave you that one. What do you think the next one is? Behavior is observable. And look, thank you so much. Behavior is observable. And what else did somebody write in for the next blank line? Behavior is measurable. That is correct. And you're way back there somewhere. And where are you? Where are you? Yeah, woman in the white clothes right back there. And then what about the third one? Behavior is observable. And the next one is, oh yeah, that's it, isn't it? Behavior is observable and behavior is measurable. So, and then, why does Susan, okay, and the other one is this, I gave it to you actually. Behavior is communication. The kinds of things that children and adolescents do, and actually the kinds of things we all do, we communicate. And I would love to hear those of you who are experts on communication tell us things like, what percentage of our communication is actually nonverbal? And don't forget that as you work with the children. There's a great deal of nonverbal communication. And I can see people telling me that, yes, they understand by their nods and things like that. So what are they telling us? In the article, for example, the young man who was unmotivated and who was not at all interested in reading, do you recall that article about the child and the turtle? And the turtle is actually a software program that when the child connected with that software programming, he finally was engaged in his tasks, right? Rather than when he was unengaged. So behavior is observable, behavior is measurable, and do not ever forget that behavior is communication. And I would like to show you a very small little piece of video here that illustrates that point. Oops. Okay. I'd like to show you a very small little piece of video that makes it very obvious to us that behavior is indeed communication.
What is it? Tell me what it is. Tell me. Tell me. Oh, you're telling me you're hungry. That's what you do when you're hungry, huh? And you show me that little mouth thing, huh? You're like, yum, 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 I want to eat, eat, eat. Is that it? Tell me more, honey. Tell me something. Really? You want a bottle? Is that what you want? You want a bottle? Yeah? Yeah? Is that what it is? I think it is. Okay. Mama's gonna go get you a bottle. Okay? Mama's gonna go get you a bottle. Okay, now. All right.
Isn't that amazing? And ever so young, these things are going on. Okay. So implications of information on theoretical framework. One of the things that I notice is that it's very hard to put all these things together. As people at the university and as people yourselves who are in supervisory roles, and those of you who are teaching, we might know that behavior is observable, behavior is learned, behavior is communication. But when you're out there in the middle of a busy school world, in the middle of a busy children's lives, it's hard to remember that you need to stop and think, what is this child telling us by what they're doing this moment, you know? So clearly, we could stop for a little minute and write your own reflection on what it is regarding underpinning that comes to your mind as you think about the notion that we might indeed need to pay more attention to our own theoretical underpinnings as we think. Maybe like take 1 minute and write down what first came to your mind as you realized, yeah, you know, theoretical framework and philosophy and our thinking about what we're seeing is very important. Maybe take like 30 seconds to write a sentence or so. What is it that might indeed be rather crucial about that? To our integrating our own theory base in a conscious way. What are the challenges to integrating it in a challenging way, in a conscious way? We have a theory base and we want to go out there and use it. What are the challenges to doing that? And are there challenges? Maybe there aren't. Maybe you feel yourself very guided by your theoretical framework and there's no problem trying to do that. Do you? If that's true, that's awesome. If every day, you know, as you go through, you know, your professional decision making, you're always conscious of what does theory tell me, you know, then you're very, very good shape to come up with really good solutions. Whereas if you forget about a theory base and don't use it consciously, you know, what kinds of things result. So that's the idea. Just think for a second. Does anybody want to offer any thing that you know, any observation regarding that? Yes?
Patience and taking away emotion.
Very good point. Because if we come at the challenges we are encountering with awareness that this child has learned to behave in this way, now my job is to teach them another way to behave. And it gives you so much guidance about how do I go about teaching this child an alternative way to act instead of the way he or she is acting. Whether it is that little Navun in the study of the disengaged boy who wouldn't read, and you'd wonder, how will I reach him? How will I reach him? And finally, you know, yes, the technology, you know, the turtle technology did the connecting. Other observations, it guides your decision. Yes, thank you.
I just found that, or find a lot, my challenge is more the teachers. I can see trying to figure out a different route to working on the behavior, and then I have a lot of the teachers that I'm working with that don't want to hear that. They just think the kid's a brat and they want you to fix it, but they don't really want to work on fixing it. So it's, you know, like when I'm trying to present, well, let's see why they're doing it, and you know, you need them to be on board to figure it out, and they don't. It's like, you're used to brat or that mindset, and they don't want to see it as something else or work on it.
That's exactly what you might indeed hear too frequently. This child is doing this, and we send them to the principal's office because they're a brat. Does that happen? It happens, doesn't it? And we must remember that this response, Navon's, is that how we'll say his name, the little boy who, in that story, in the article, the case study we read, he was not working because it did not mean anything to the material, the way it had been presented, was not occupying his attention. right? We also have another case study that you read that in your beautiful packet that Sherry put together about Susan. That little child, as she is growing up, she is showing some challenging behaviors. The job for the teachers and the parents is to figure out what is going on here. So clearly those quick little solutions aren't lasting ones, and they're not really teaching the children the things they need to be learning. Does anybody else want to make an observation regarding the importance of having a theory base to guide our thinking and our decision making? Thank you.
A lot of times in Dev Ed, there's lots of theories and framework, but I feel like we're always adjusting and modifying, and there's not a lot of data, we don't have a lot of numbers, so it's kind of guess and check, which is fine, but sometimes that's tiring, or maybe it works one day, or maybe it works for one student, but the next challenge, kind of have to go back to square one.
That's an excellent observation, and I know in deaf education, the deaf culture, it's very complicated, and parents come to your classroom and your schools with a very strong preference one way or another. How do you teach this child, and how do you take in all those things into account? But let me tell you that the notion that behavior is observable, behavior is measurable, people communicate by the way they behave. You can be confident that there is a database that is solid for more than 50 years under that particular data, under that more than 50. Like all the behavioral theory, it's behavioral theory. So you can keep that as a kind of perennial in your professional chest of resources. The notion that behavior is observable, the children are learning the kinds of things that they have learned. They're either pro-social and they're they're useful and helpful, as in literacy development, and all of the observable and measurable kinds of behaviors that we see, either academic or social, we want to promote positive ones, right? And then we want to adjust and change ones that are not pro-social and that are not in the child's best interest. So basically, I'm offering to you that we need a solid theoretical framework to guide our thinking. Otherwise, we are not going to have a very we're not going to have solutions readily available to us as we're trying to solve the challenges that are very, very real. As I proceed, clearly we could spend hours on this one because it is complicated and interesting and fascinating, and those of you who have taken whole courses in behavioral theory will know that you could take 3 hours of study on behavioral theory alone, right? But we merely remind ourselves today of these notions, and following this, I want to share with you many implications of that theory. The children and the adolescents are engaging in behaviors. Again, now you can be filling out things and writing things out. You'll see this slide again, by the way, because we're going to be getting at it again, and I will be repeating this one as we go along. But you may, I've added a little bit to the presentation, so your notes and this may not always be exactly the same. But the idea will come up in your notes later on. The notion that we do the things we do for a reason. Okay? We either want to get the things we wish for, or we want to avoid the things we don't want. Right? So the children and the adolescents, you see, are either seeking or avoiding. Again, we simplify, don't we, in order to communicate. Clearly, it may not always be so easy to understand what is it that is communicated. And again, I could spend another half an hour sharing and hearing you all tell me, what is this particular child trying to get? It's simplified when you say it's trying to get attention. Yeah, trying to get positive academic attention. the child works hard, the child is studying, the child is doing very well because the child is getting positive academic attention for academic skill development. What is this behavior providing? So the child continues to be organized and ready for school, etc. So you have the best case scenario going when the child is indeed engaged in getting a positive and desirable and pro-social kind of thing. Many times they will be trying to avoid, so you're going to see them doing things that are avoiding and escaping. So instead of simply coming up with an easy kind of quick fix sort of thing, think about what is it that this behavior is trying to accomplish. So very, very important notion that behavior is communication, behavior has a goal. And now it's our big job to figure out what is the goal of the behavior. We learned about Susan. We are so challenged by Susan. You have it in your little blue sheet. And Susan, yes, she's deaf, but she has many more things going on, doesn't she? She has so much more going on besides being deaf. She is what we might call complex deaf. Isn't that how you complex deaf? And as she has all the medical kinds of things going on. She has then the intellectual disability kinds of challenges going on. So teachers will have to be so aware of all the challenges relative to what is it that would help this child learn, and then so we have a great deal of information available to us about her. I provided that, and actually here I have a big file as well on her work. I have audiological assessments, and I have many more information. So we need data to drive our decision making. We need data to help us to understand what is going on here. This child is doing this because, and you have data from the file, the existing file, and today we're going to spend lots of time talking about many different variety of sources, many different ways to generate data to make really great programs and therefore maximize our chances. What do we need to know? How have we used all the data sources? Have we found what's useful in this challenging situation? Do we know all we need to know to make the best possible choices? So be flexible in your selection. Take time to try to observations about Susan. Take time to figure out what is it that would serve us well in relation to this child. So as you think about Susan, the blue sheet, do you want to tell me what pops out to you as a teacher when you see what do you have on the sheet that oh my goodness, this one thing, two things, three things, four things. You could obviously do it by yourself, or you could share with one another. As you looked at her at the little blue sheet, maybe you can just share together, all of us here. What just jumps out to you about this little girl? Or did you get a chance to read it yet? No? You might take a few minutes then just to run through it real quickly, because I think you just got it a while ago, right? Yeah. Now you feel free to talk, with each other. You don't have to whisper at all. There's no reason in the world. Just as you look at that little sheet, I see people have underlined comments and things like that. What comes out? What jumps out? Do you have something that jumps out to you? Yeah?
She has a lot of health issues
She has health issues. She
and
wrote.
syndromes and various things, and had a significant birth history.
She had a significant birth history. She has a lot of medical things going on. And what else?
That might help you understand some of her delays and not expect her to behave like a 6-year-old
Yes.
and not have the awareness of a 6-year-old.
Yes. So that helps you to understand. As you read existing files, you expect differently now that you've read this. So therefore, as we think about planning programs, a hugely important source of data is take time to study the file. Take time to study what is in there that tells me about disposing kinds of things that are so important as you try to plan programs for her. Plan a meaningful program. So existing files are a great data source. That's certainly something to take seriously. Other thoughts on, as you take a little look at Susan? Yes?
It looks like her receptive language and her cognition is lower than her expressive language, which is a little odd. I'm wondering if she just has rote. Maybe that's what's frustrating her. Maybe that's higher, or she's being seen as being higher than she actually is.
Yes. She might be very complicated in that she's doing a lot of expressing, and you think that it's a little bit unusual. You'd always expect that the receptive would be higher actually. So it's a fascinating little piece of information to keep that in mind. So as you puzzle through, how do you make the best possible program for her? Making those very, 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 very keen observations guides your decision making very, very well. Other thoughts as you read it? Yes?
What does it look like when she's frustrated and upset and angry, and what's happening right before she does those behaviors?
That's so important. Again, you have many questions. You read just one little sheet with so much information on one little sheet, and you walk away from having read that saying, oh my goodness, there's so much more I need to know. And it's not enough to say she's upset and frustrated. We need to know, what does she do? How do I know that that's what's going on? And maybe it makes a whole lot of sense if you could understand the environment around what that behavior is all about. It possibly might be at certain times of the day, or it might be, at certain days of the week. Who knows? All the information as you ask yourself questions regarding the kinds of information that you read regarding other teachers' descriptions of children, or any kind of information in files. You have a lot of questions things to explore. Other thoughts? I notice people chatting, and that's great. Tell me other thoughts that kind of are in your mind as you think about her. Yes, thank you.
I want to know what type of kindergarten she's in, who's using sign with her, what is the classroom structure, and what kind of support she's getting.
Right, because the environment could indeed set the stage for really good things to be happening for her, and the environment could do all kinds of things all along the continuum of good, bad, and indifferent, couldn't it? And thank you so much.
It was something different. Were you finished?
The environment, we'll get after that. We'll get after all of these ideas as we proceed, because we're thinking underpinnings and our thinking, because that's what we'll be exploring a lot of today. Yep.
I want to know more about her hearing loss, like how much she can hear with her aids, and whether or not her behavior is correlated with when she's wearing her.
Want to know more about her hearing loss, and indeed, are those hearing aids just what she needs or not? So many considerations.
I'm curious about the communication mode of the family. It doesn't say if the family's signing with her, which philosophy they believe in, what kind of language is going on at home. There's pictures.
Yes. So many things to consider, aren't there? And the family, it sounds like they're a wonderfully supportive family. you know, sounds like they're, you know, really there for the child. They come to meetings and they, you know, so that's a step in the right direction. You know, we certainly have family attention, but then you want to know much more about that, and you want to know how, you know, how much attention and structure and guidance and resources are there for her at home.
It talks about her intervention is also concerned about her vision, but nowhere else does it mention about what test results with the vision test, how much vision she has,
So,
anything to do with her vision at birth, and this might be a source of frustration.
Exactly. And now, so you're thinking her vision needs to be checked. And as first grade, you know, kindergarten, first grade, things get more symbolic. As we grow older, you know, we move away from the little toys and things. We maybe move into more symbolic use. So therefore, maybe her vision might be something very necessary to check. Thank you.
One of the other things it mentions is she puts her fingers in her mouth for calming, so maybe figuring out what are some other things that calm her or that she enjoys.
And beautiful point. We are going to talk today too about reinforcers and reinforcer selection and the whole sensory needs. She's clearly a huge sensory needs. So, and all of your beautiful input. I cannot be running around spreading candy all over the room, you know. But I have. We'll put those on the table maybe later on. Yes. Thank you so much.
I'd also want to know more about her medical conditions. She's diagnosed with reflux, has a history of aspiration pneumonia. It says that she had a video swallow, I'm assuming, back when she was 6 months. Has that been followed up on? Is she still experiencing symptoms of reflux? Or is she aspirating?
Many good questions. And all of these things matter. Every single one of these things matter. The hearing, the seeing, the sensory. You know, the learning. A child who has Down syndrome has a great need for concrete representation of concepts, you know. So the more wonderful, colorful, you know, sensory input that you can provide her, the better. So her learning needs are huge. Then of course working with the family, maximizing home and school. But the whole approach to her is so different when you think about behavior is observable, behavior is learned. She's communicating to me by what she's doing. That helps you so much, because now you're thinking, how do I problem solve? And how do I get my data from all these varied sources that indeed are available to me? The doctors, the audiologists, the family, all of these people are data sources, and that provide you really important input as you make educational decisions. So wonderful input there, and I appreciate it so much. So we will go on and we will talk about Susan again as we go forward, and if you have more observations as we go along, don't hesitate to raise your hand at any point. I welcome that so very much. As we become comfortable in our professional endeavors, there are many risks. Again, this is a little added piece. I just added you little pieces of the puzzle here that I thought would clarify and make so this is a little added one again, a little inserted few thoughts. Let's not just think we have it down. We do not get comfortable. All right, so it's a professional risk. If we just see this child misbehave in the hall, and she maybe yelled or who knows what she did in the hallway, and you make your program decision based on one moment, so may work with the same child for years and years, and you maybe get comfortable. Instead, the idea here is that we will take ongoing data, and we will take, notice of her day by day, and we'll be making notes, and today, later on, as we go on here, we'll be talking about how to maximize the potential of that data that we'll be taking on a daily and, weekly basis to make decisions. So ongoing data collection, because the child is developing, and you don't just stay with what you noticed 6 months ago or a year ago, or So as we proceed, we need to keep in mind that with our theoretical base, behavior is learned. I teach. When something needs to be learned, I go about trying to teach it, right? That's a theory base that we're going to be guided by all day long here today. So the use of positive reinforcement, the notion that you'll increase desirable behaviors by positively reinforcing what you see. Huge vocabulary around the notion of behavioral theory. These are such important pieces of terminology because this helps our professional communication with each other. There are many, many more little pieces of terminology that we need to keep in common, that we share and have in common as well. And every one of you here are dealing with FBAs and BIPs and so many more pieces of technology. In a certain sense, that vocabulary is our huge resource, professional resource. Data from a variety of sources. Yes, that medical file information is so important. A variety of sources, data from a variety of sources. And then using our shared vocabulary, we meet the educational needs of the children we are trying to reach as educators. Okay, now? So putting it all together, here, guided by our theory base, as professionals, we seek to understand and we seek to solve the problems that arise in the lives of the children, as in, are there little blanks that you'd like me to go back on or anything like that? The last slide that, okay. Okay, let's see. Okay. Are you fine on that? Good. So then as professionals, we are indeed using all our data sources, right? A variety of them. And today I so look forward to presenting you some thoughts, perhaps indeed, about data sources that we don't use enough, perhaps, and that'll really help us make some good decisions as we go for the highest possible quality that we can muster in our program development. So, therefore, keep in your minds as you deal with the kinds of professional decision making you make on a daily basis, know that what Susan has learned, she's showing you, right? She's showing you. Then we observe and measure what it is that we can observe and measure. And then we keep in our minds that she is communicating to us. And she's asking us for our understanding by the kinds of her best effort at communicating, right? All right, so then as we proceed here, and I know we're a little bit behind time, so we are going to proceed now with aggregating data. When we think about aggregating data, you might try to find your sheet there on aggregating data, and then what are we talking about when we think about aggregating data? Let us be very clear what we are doing. And by the way, on your tables this morning, I added a few more little things to read. One of them is that notion that behavior is learned, and the notion that behavior is communication. So the kinds of things that you see a child do, she is telling you, I am very comfortable in your classroom. Wouldn't that be just what you want to hear? You know, I am very comfortable with my peers. I am very comfortable in this environment. That's what you want to hear. But if the child is not comfortable in the classroom, is not comfortable with the peers, is not comfortable with the teacher, you know, you're going to be getting that message, and it's a matter of trying to discern, truly a matter of trying to discern what is it that the child is and how is it being communicated, you know. So that's what this little sheet is trying to tell us here, that behavior is indeed communication. Anybody who did not get that, raise your hand and I will happily bring this to you. It's this one-page effort by somebody to remind us that of this incredibly important idea. Anybody else? And if you want to take it for your peer teacher who's not here or some such thing, we have extras too. Then I also put on your desks this morning some puzzle pieces. And to me, this is so symbolic because sometimes you have a crucial piece of the puzzle. And when that's put with somebody else's, you've got it understood. So, and two together, oh my goodness, that fell together much too easily, didn't it? Doesn't that actually happen sometimes? Doesn't that happen sometimes? Oh my goodness. We came to the table and it came together. Isn't that a wonderful experience? It is a wonderful experience. Too seldom it happens so easily though, wouldn't you think? So I'm going to put this right up here and we are going to see how this fits into the bigger picture as we go here today. So I know that by the end of the day we will have a completed puzzle because you'll all come to the table with your piece of information. That might indeed be the answer to what it is that needs to be addressed. So let me proceed now and look at the notes and find our cells here. To aggregate, what are we talking about? What do we mean by aggregate? We are going to gather into or considered as a whole. So obviously we're going to take a little peek at the dictionary and see what it is that's meant by the notion of aggregating. Many different parts. Oh my goodness, how many different parts? You have such complicated work to do, don't you? You have families to listen to, you have administrators, you have the state guidelines, you have standards, you have so many different parts to consider. The notion of inclusion, the notion of working in teams, and so many different complicated parts. So making it all work and making it all come together is what we're trying to do. Taken as a whole and making it all come together. Why do we do this? Now, maybe you have some fill-ins, do you, along this one, or are you fine on this? Don't hesitate to let me know to go slower or something like that. Why do we do this? Obviously, we're doing it for many reasons. Program evaluation, all these different things. Why are we aggregating? We know well that somebody just might have the answer. That doctor who told me she needs glasses made such a difference. Right? You might be trying for so long to reach Susan, and finally a pair of glasses made such a difference, you know? Or some kind of, maybe 18-point font. It's such an easy thing. Just because somebody came to the table with a piece of information that was crucial. That's what we're doing when we aggregate data. We're asking who can add information to this puzzle that can help us unravel the challenges here, you know? Then we want to get to know Susan. We're aggregating data for all these different reasons, by the way. It's a little added piece for you to think about. We're either individualizing, we're either assessing. Why aggregate? We're going to be aggregating to plan our instruction, What worked last week, last month, last year? What did that previous teacher experience with this child? So you're aggregating data for implementation purposes, what really works when you're implementing, and then what really works, how did all this come together? Evaluating. So you're aggregating, you're generating data so that all of this comes together for you. And then I put it in such a spiral that it keeps going. Next year she'll be 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 in the years to come. You're going to go back again and think about how will I individualize for her now? Or even after a new piece of information, what does that piece of information mean in relation to program development? Maybe it does mean that you're going to go about giving her different materials. Those materials need to be larger, or they need to be maybe more concrete, or something that might guide your individualization for her, or that guides your assessment. What is it? I need more information from the family. I don't know enough about her sibling relationships. Friendships, does she have friendships outside of school? All of those things matter here in relation to, as we assess, so that we may plan our programs and move on. And it's a continued process. You don't just stop it when you get to the point of, maybe it's the month of May, and it all starts again. And even mid-year 2, when changes occur, you're constantly dealing with that ongoing data generation. So we are getting to know Susan, and we are getting to know her. This is where you'll be writing again now. Getting to know her. And somebody said in our discussion over here, what does she like in terms of reinforcers? That sensory calming that she's doing. What is it that what might that be about? What are reinforcers that work for this child? So getting to know Susan, getting to know the areas of strength that she is bringing, getting to know the areas that need to be worked on. So you're going to get to know her. And now we'll be talking more about how do we get to know her, how do we get to know the environment, and we've said those things in our earlier discussion. What kind of environment is this? Get to know the environment, get to know what needs to be known. And then we need data, and I'll be saying this again throughout our time together, a variety of sources. Not just one, not just two, a variety of sources. And by the way, I'll be saying the words qualitative and quantitative. Your anecdotal records, the notes that you write after a discussion with a parent, might indeed be very important, and they might be an anecdotal record. How do we document that? I'll be talking about that later today as well. So what do we need to know? A variety of sources, both qualitative and quantitative. And I'll be sharing the difference and how to even deal with all these different data as we go forward. And then a functional assessment gives us an added tool for behavior assessment and analysis. So indeed, FBAs might indeed be essential when that time comes for you to understand what is really going on with this child. So we have an added tool, and I'll be talking to you about 6 steps that you can use. And I know you have a form on the website that helps you to think about functional assessment and analysis. I'll be offering you today a kind of logic that shows you the process of doing that, maybe that sometimes isn't as obvious in the forms we're using. So sometimes then you might wind up tailoring the forms for a little easier use, So these are the kinds of things we'll be talking about here as we talk further here. Principles of data collection, and you've got some little things here to consider. I could ask you to fill in those yourselves. Who is going to get the first one? You have it, right? Who's going to get the next one? What do you think your best guess is on the next one? Pardon me? Very, very, very close. Very, very close. Natural. Natural. Actually, the word we'll use is various. Natural is a very nice word to put with authentic, in fact. Natural and various, right? Then who's going to give me the next one? Yes?
Variables.
Variables. Let's take a peek. Holistically. Isn't that an interesting and wonderful word to put in there? Because it basically helps us to see that we need to take the whole child into account. Their, medical needs in terms of the little girl we've been talking about, her family life, the whole child, holistically. Then her educational needs, which have to deal with her intellectual disability, and her communication needs, her audiological needs. What other needs have we missed on? Emotional needs, sensory needs, the holistic, observe holistically. Okay, now, and the next one, who will give it a whirl? Yes. Very good, very nice guess. Observe both process and product. Observe both process, how things are going, ongoing, and then the products at the end. Have you ever got into discussions about what's more important, process or product? I'm sure you have, haven't you? What wins for you? You like process to win, maybe in the balance of which is more important, process or product. I heard product. Did I hear product? I hear product, standards and meeting them. Oh my goodness, so product focused, right? But indeed, process is so important as well. Maybe we can accept the fact that both are important, aren't they? But, it's a matter of which of them which of them might we intellectually prioritize, but truly we need both to be going on. So observe both process and product. So what data, then errors, I threw that in as an added little piece of information. Whenever you see a child making errors, we know as educators that errors matter and that you don't just skip by them and not notice what are the errors that are being made, because they have much to tell you about what needs to be done instructionally. So if we can analyze the errors and see if there's any kind of pattern in the errors, principles of data collection. Any thoughts, any observations, any, yes?
I don't really know what you mean by errors and patterns. You mean his academic errors? You mean his behavior?
I so appreciate your question. That's an excellent and important question. What might it mean? Error patterns. What are they? Help me. What are error patterns? Can you answer? Anybody else? Error patterns. What are we talking about? Are they academic errors only? What are error patterns? What might be instructive on error patterns?
I would say any and all of them. The math errors they make, as well as when they make a social error and the kind of reinforcement and stuff they get because of it. What's happening after any error and before?
Any error. Any and all of them. Beautifully said. Any and all of them. Any errors. Like if there's a social communication going on, and may I make an error, Kim? Can you forgive me? This is showing an error, all right? And this is what a child with Down syndrome might do, all right? A child with Down syndrome might come up to you and give you a hug. That's a social error. Now, as a teacher, what do you do with that? It's very important to teach that little girl that you do not go up to somebody you don't know and give the person a hug. Many smiles here. I'm sure you have nieces and nephews and you've seen them. You have daughters, you have sons, and they are marvelous children. But we need to tell them that when they go to the mall, they don't give the first person they see a hug. Wouldn't you agree? It's actually quite dangerous too. It could really not be in their best interest. Social errors help you then to make professional decisions. Isn't that right? Because maybe as a teacher, you're going to interweave a little bit of social skill instruction into something. You'll either do a focus lesson on greeting skills, which might be quite appropriate, and do it for 20 minutes. Greeting skills. How do you greet somebody appropriately? It's very important to know how. So watch the little slips, the little errors. And they're a data source. The little errors they make, any imaginable errors, any and all of them, is what our colleague told us. Any and all of them. So the little social errors tell us indeed what you might want to, what we use, as educators we use the word infuse, don't we? And we could infuse it into the middle of something or other, as we teach our, language arts or math or whatever it might be, that we'll infuse the social skill. But then on the other hand, you can give a focused lesson. And again, I would say do both. There might be times when appropriate greeting at the beginning of class might be something you could interweave into the lesson, right? Or in the morning when the child walks in the door into the classroom, you could infuse it into a routine in the morning, and clear up the little errors of social exchange if you see those happening. And by the way, I could have spent as long talking about academic errors. I could have spent as long talking about self-care, like a little child not washing their hands, when they should wash their hands. Hygiene, just pure hygiene. Hanging a little coat where it belongs. Management of materials, being organized. If you see errors in any of those things, analyze those, because they actually help you to see the kinds of things that the child has learned inappropriately maybe, or the kinds of things they need to learn that they have not yet learned at all, So analyze errors, and even error patterns. If you see little patterns, then clearly it's something to work on. I really appreciate the question, because that's a wonderful data source. Okay. So, what data do we need to generate? We need to be generating all kinds of data. Data on the child, and we have our little Susan, and I know there's a little break. Is there Sherry coming up here very shortly?
About 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. Data on the child. What are the presenting academic and social behaviors? And you might throw in self-care and, maybe even pre-vocational, depending on the kind of program you're doing. If you're in a high school environment, any imaginable skills. What are the presenting social and academic kinds of things? What data do we need to be generating? We need to be generating data about the environment. That's very important. There's a very, very important word relative to environment. Whenever you hear the word environment, think of the word antecedent, which I know we said earlier. The environment is an antecedent because it sets the stage for things to happen. If the environment is well organized, it sets the stage for positive behaviors. So data on the environment, and we'll talk about getting data on the environment shortly. Then what are the consequences to the behaviors? And this notion of there's an antecedent, there's a behavior happening, and then that causes a certain outcome. So that whole notion is another thing that helps us to unravel the challenges that we're encountering professionally. So again, it gives us a place to go. We think we know the student. Given our worst case scenario, we think we know the child. Maybe an incident occurred. Something or other happened. This is something to worry about here. If we did not continue, trying to unravel and problem solve, we'll send the child off to the office. Why is ongoing data generation so important? Can you maybe jot a note on the little piece of paper that you have there in your notes? Why is ongoing data Why is it so important? Just jot a note on that. And I'd love to see you doing that, and then